why don't we just start now? And then when they join us, are you good with that?
Sure.
Why don't, Heather, you tell us a little bit more about Authority Brands?
Sure. So Authority Brands is in franchising what we call a platform company. So it's basically the parent company that sits over 16 different home service brands in 15 different verticals, we call them. So home services for us are things like plumbing, HVAC, house cleaning, electrical, all those types of things. Basically everything that your house needs from the roof line to the property line, we say we can take care of for you. So we have grown to be 16 brands through acquisition. So we started as one brand, and then we started buying up other similar home service companies to kind of create some efficiency. So if you can imagine, we combined accounting and we combined legal departments and all of the things that we didn't need to have costs in multiple places. So we've got about 2,000 franchisees across the US and Canada, and about $2 billion in sales that our franchisees will do this year. And it's been a really crazy road because all that growth has happened in about 5 years, which is really, really fast to go from one brand and 350 million to 16 brands and 2 billion. But it's been really, really fun. And that kind of platform trend is a trend right now in franchising in general, that brands are kind of buying up similar brands and putting them all together. So that's a little bit about kind of us and the history of Authority Brands.
Thank you. Why don't you talk about Wild Birds Unlimited?
Yeah, Wild Birds Unlimited. We're the original backyard bird feeding specialty stores. We have retail stores, started in Indiana, just north of Kentucky, and in 1981. We've been franchising since 83, and we have 360 open stores, and they're retail stores in brick and mortar with an omni-channel, an online presence, so all of our stores also have their own individual selling websites, which was a saving grace for us during COVID. We actually did really well. I've been with the brand since 1989, so way longer than most of you have been alive. So 35, I celebrate my 35th year next month, so in just about a month.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so single brand, very focused on providing maybe your parents, grandparents, cousins, friends, backyard bird feeding. Who feeds the birds, or whose family feeds the birds? There we go, that's a lot of good hands. Well, the rest of you should consider that. Yeah.
That is when I knew I reached a new milestone in my life, is when my husband and I became avid bird watchers. Just saying. I mean, yeah, I reached a new level, but I love it. It is really something. Excellent. Are they ready? Do you know? John, Troy? Well, we're trying this. This is an experiment. So thank you for being with us.
This is great practice, though, for jobs in the future, because I would say almost every meeting there's some kind of technical difficulty, and then everybody gets to sit around and try to figure out, how do we get the computer working? Why isn't it projecting on the screen? Where is the sound coming from? So very real life example.
It is, and then how do you dance? How do you continue to have a conversation when people are looking at you, even though the screen's up? Now it looks like they're getting straight. Okay. Hello, Lindsay.
Hi, Dr. Gozer. How are you?
Hello, Dr. Thomsen. There she is. Do we hear her?
Oh, there we go. We can see.
We're here. Can you hear us?
Oh, we can see right there. Yes, we hear you. Maybe a little louder. Can you all hear in the audience?
Nobody has ever told me to be louder.
If they could talk, for a length of time, if you could request that.
Dr. Thomsen, if you could talk for a little bit, please.
Okay, fantastic. Well, how about I get us started? Does that work?
Yeah.
Yes, why don't you get us started? I've said that University of Nebraska is in the house now, so would you please take it over from there?
I'm happy to do so. So this is the second collaboration that the University of Nebraska has done with the University of Louisville. Dr. Gozer and I did a book club earlier this academic year on Martha Harper, who was credited for developing the business format franchise model that has led to all of us being in this room today. It was a great book club. Loved being with you, Dr. Gozer. We had about a dozen women in each university. Is that right?
That's about
to
right.
talk about that book?
Yes.
And we had the author with us, which is fantastic. So this is fun that we get to do this again. And shall we jump right in?
Let's do it.
All right. Well, I think the first question is ours. We're going to start talking about the franchise model. So, Joe, can you tell us about the franchise model and why it drives growth?
Well, one of the most fascinating things about it is that it allows a brand to grow rapidly. And most brands that are franchises achieve scale because you have so many people involved with growing your brand simultaneously. But it's really important, though, when you think about it from the franchisee perspective, this is an opportunity for them to demonstrate entrepreneurship, but do it in an established model where the tools and resources are already available. And it's really the marriage of both, the business model growing and the entrepreneurship. And then finally, one of the coolest things that happens of all is just the validation. So many people that have bought into the Scooters Coffee system as franchisees referred someone else, a family member, a friend, a former coworker, and that's how our network has grown. So that's the power of franchising. It just looks different than a corporate structure.
I like that. It's definitely based on relationships.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. It's so nice to meet you, Joe and Tom. Even though we are virtual, we've talked a lot about you two and your accomplishments here in Louisville. So I'm going to turn it to you, Heather, and ask you a question. So tell us a little bit about the relationship between franchisees and you as the franchisor.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, that is the cornerstone, I think, of a successful franchisee-franchisor relationship, is just to remember it's exactly that. It's a relationship and it's a partnership. And it really is a collaboration. I mean, your franchisees are in the field, living the life, feet on the ground, making it happen. And so they often see, feel, and hear things in a different way than we do in the corporate office. And so I think just remembering that it should be like a marriage of sorts, really. It's a collaboration, and it should be focused on respect and mutual goal. So anytime I have a conversation with a franchisee that seems like it might be going in a direction that I don't want it to, I try to always remind myself, like, we're focused on the same thing, and that's growing revenue. They want to grow revenue, I want to grow revenue, it's a win-win. Sometimes we have different opinions on how to do that successfully, but it really is such an important relationship to try and really cherish and kind of maintain. And that, I think, is what separates really successful franchisors from franchisors who maybe aren't as successful, is the focus that they put on really maintaining a healthy, productive relationship with their franchisees.
See you all when I talk about relationships all the time. It's not just me. Here are the experts. I hammer that so much. So back to you, Dr. Thomsen.
I could say ditto to that. All right, Tom, why would someone want to work for a franchisor at a corporate headquarters?
Yeah, great question. First, I'd like to thank Dean Kathy Farrell and Lindsay and Sam for inviting us all here back. For me, it's back home, the University of Nebraska, and it's great. Why franchisor? One word, opportunity. And when I look at opportunity, you look at the bigger picture, the big numbers. 875,000 franchise entities across the United States, $1 trillion in economic output, 3% of GDP in the United States. And if you look at employment, 10 million people are employed in franchising. And consider that in 160 million people in the United States being employed, it's roughly 6 to 7%. So absolutely astounding. And when I think about, young grads that are coming out of college, when I think about folks that are mid-level in their career, are executive, there's a place for everybody in franchising. Whether you're a newly minted grad, you're coming out, you got your tool belt on and you're adding tools to it, you can get into franchising very simply into different categories, whether it's IT, whether it's HR, sales, operations. You can get into any aspect of the business world that you possibly want and work cross-functionally and collaborate with people within franchising. I'll tell you, a great story of having everyone here today. Joe's vice president of operation, he worked for me at Lyft Brands. And my development vice president at Byrider worked at Authority Brands. And I personally worked at Yum Brands for 7 years.
Yeah, you did.
Helped with Taco Bell operations for many years. So it's circular. It's a family, and you can move within the ecosystem.
That was a great explanation of that, Tom. Thank you so much, because you're right. It is circular, and so many of us have all worked with each other at one point. I think you were at Taco Bell when I was at Yum, so it is an interesting world for sure. But Paul, Why would someone want to be a franchisee? Talk a little bit about what being a franchisee means.
Yeah, I think there's an umbrella answer, and it's oftentimes used in marketing from franchisors, probably overused about franchising, why you would want to be a franchisee. It allows you to be in business for yourself, but not by yourself. That's an overused sort of phrase in franchise development marketing, but what it does is franchising allows you to have the autonomy of being your own boss and owning your own business that you have invested in, and it's your asset, but also you have the support of a franchise. And that support, I think, comes in a lot of different ways. It comes from like true support with operating practices, standard operating practices that have been tried and trued and tested by the franchisor and the other franchisees that have gone before you. Brand recognition. There's also just the support, that the community side of being part of something that's bigger than yourself. So I think that's why you'd want to be a franchisee in an umbrella. Why you'd want to pick a specific brand, I think then gets more complex, and there's a lot more reasons that drive people's decision to be a Wild Birds Unlimited franchisee or a Scooter's Coffee, or, you know, and some of that is passion for the brand, passion for what the brand is doing and providing to the community. Others, it's the KPIs are great, the key performance indicators. There's just, you can make a lot of money doing something that has been done before you, and it's just much less risk. Mm-hmm. Others, it's about the combination of, I've never had a business by myself. I just am afraid to do this. I don't know what I don't know. Joining a franchise is going to allow me to live my dream of having my own business, you know, basically lighting the entrepreneurial flame, but doing it in a low risk environment.
Awesome, thank you. Well, we have this question. We're going to throw it to Heather, and then I'd also like to throw it back to Tom, because Tom, you started on this question as well. So Heather, I'll have you start, and then Dr. Thomsen, I'll ask you to grab it back with Tom. But what types of opportunities are there for college graduates?
Oh my gosh. Oh, sorry. Is that me?
Why don't we have Heather go, and then
Okay,
Tom, we'll throw it back to you.
Sorry, Tom. Yeah, so I actually came into franchising straight out of grad school. So I was living in Waco, Texas, which is where Neighborly, at the time was called the Dwyer Group. They were the first kind of platform home service franchisor. They were based in the same town that I was in school. And I went and interviewed for a job, and that's how I kind of snuck into franchising. And I think you'll hear from a lot of people who are in franchising that we kind of fell into it in some ways. A lot of us did. And then a lot of us made the conscious choice to say, like, this is a really great place to build a career. Because I heard, I don't know, Tom, if it was you, but the reference earlier to like family, that franchising is a lot like family. And it really is a small world of a lot of us that have all worked together at different places and different organizations. Because the business model is a little unique, and you guys are getting such a great experience and exposure to that being here that I didn't have when I came out of school and started working in franchising. I had to learn the business model as I was learning my coworkers and the verticals I was working in and all of these different things all at the same time. So I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity for people to build a career in franchising. I know that I never thought that I would have 15 years in franchising under my belt. It's not quite 35 like Mr. Pickett over here, but it's a good number. And I think you guys are gonna have such an upper hand by having even just exposure to what franchising is as a business model, because franchisors are always looking for people who have experience in franchising or have experience in multi-location, because the biggest problems we have to solve for normally involve scale. Mm-hmm. How do we do things for 200 locations when if we were corporately owned, our budgets would look a lot different than they look in a franchise model? And that's just kind of the reality of the way the business model is set up. So for you guys to have exposure to all of that is such a great step ahead. And there are so many franchise brands out there that you could consider from a corporate office perspective, corporate team perspective. So I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity for you guys.
Thanks. Why don't we pass that back to, thank you, Heather, pass that back to Tom.
Great. Well, yeah, I agree. I think that there's a wonderful opportunity for recent grads or people entering the workforce to learn new skills, to get an opportunity to try things. You'll get a chance to actually work and to actually own things, become part of a bigger team, a collaborative team. You'll get feedback, you'll get coached. Any franchisor of scale has tools, systems, and processes where you'll learn how to run a business. You'll be able to potentially manage other people. You'll be able to take your skills and tote them with you within an organization or outside that organization. So having the ability to have vertical mobility as well as lateral mobility, really important versus getting boxed into a job that you're going to stay in, maybe get promoted within that specific vertical without any opportunity. I think franchising presents itself as something that gives you a ton of adaptability with your career.
Thank you for that. So Paul, we've got another one for you. You've earned so many awards at Wild Birds Unlimited.
Well, not me, but the...
Wild Birds Unlimited has
Yeah.
earned so many awards for how you work with franchisees. What do you attribute that to?
It's just it's part of the culture of the brand, and I think that's an important thing as you're looking to go to work in franchising. You have to have a good understanding of the culture of the company you're going to work with, but it's an undying devotion to the brand, and that means an undying devotion to the franchisees, the franchisor, and the brand reputation. And I think that every single day we think about that. We think about our mission, vision, and our values, and focus on making decisions that are good for everybody, sometimes not just for the franchisees and their bottom line, and usually not just for the franchise, or never just for the franchisor. It has to be a collaborative decision. And I think that when you're committed to doing that and you're in it for everybody, it allows for everybody to have a really good, solid culture, and that culture is continuous, and it's got legs of its own it's almost bigger than the brand. So focusing on that devotion, that culture, managing through that on a daily basis and having it be top of mind really makes for healthy franchisor relations, and then it extends out into the consumers, the ultimate end user. And for us, it's a little different than most brands, because our end user ultimately of our product is a bird. So, I mean, we have to consider that, right? I mean, so you really do have to think about those kind of things, which is a little different than a lot of other brands. An HVAC unit.
Yeah, not for the birds.
Yeah, well, it's probably the same in Florida as it is in Minnesota. For us, we have to consider that even like locking down things and how tight you are on, you have to be tight on your brand standards, but how those brand standards are executed is very different from market to market to market, and you just have to know that. And when you know that, you know when to be flexible and when to be tough. And that's an important thing. That was a long answer, I apologize.
That was a great answer. No, that was great. Back to you, Dr. Thomsen.
Well, Paul, I thought we had challenges, but birds? I'm kind of stuck there. I got to process that. It's interesting.
Well, Joe, I'm going to keep it on you, actually. Can you share a success story that demonstrates the power of the franchise model?
We get to live it every day, I'd say, with our franchisees. One of the things that we love about our brand, Scooter's Coffee, is we opened today 765 stores in 30 states, 190 franchisees, so we only average 4 stores per owner. And those who have more than that are bigger groups, opened 3 or 4 stores for many years and have been in the system for a long time. So we're inviting in many people who are truly moving into business for the first time. It's their first store, it's their first business. And you heard the word risk being used earlier. This does mute the risk because you're moving into a system that has tools and systems and processes in place. And so one of our moments we talked about a couple of years ago was the state of Alabama. We had a couple of great stories there. We had a couple who both working full-time jobs. The wife worked as a physical therapist assistant and decided she wanted to get into her own business. And so they started researching businesses. They started researching coffee. They ended up on Scooter's Coffee. And when you look at them, both Richard and Catherine, great American family, average family looking to make something new happen, 4 children. And Richard kept his job, but she decided, I'm going to go all in and do this. I've never done this before. small town Alabama, no store within states of this place. We did no additional brand marketing, but what was cool about it is that they opened in a small town that she's from, went to the high school there. So kind of built in excitement and energy and support, different than any corporate structure trying to open in a community. And she opened her first store and was wildly successful. And of course, couldn't run fast enough to open her second store, which she has done already. But just to hear her story, her journey through it, all of the triumphs and the challenges of staffing and leading people and all of those conversations, and yet showed up in a community in such an amazing way. And then across the other part of the state, we had another franchisee who was an insurance agent, well-known, well-positioned, him and his wife, also 4 children. He decided, while keeping his practice, to start to move into business and open a store in small town Alabama, and actually signed up for 5 stores initially, and was going to build in Birmingham, but decided to pivot to the small town close to him. And it was so good that he pivoted his whole territory out to the small markets and opened a second and a third and a fourth, expanded to 10 stores. And those are just cool stories because when you start out with the one, you don't know what it's going to look like. And yet that's what we love about our system, because when you look at some of the larger franchise systems, McDonald's or Subway, people own 300 or 400 stores. What we love about our model is so intimate. People know their first manager, their second, their third, their first multi-unit manager. And what you hear and see is the generations working together, their children, their friends, their families working alongside them. So we have so many of those great stories, but those are two.
That's fantastic. I'll head it back over to you, Louisville.
All right. Well, that was so great to hear. I know generational wealth is such a great output of franchising. So thank you for sharing that, Joe. That was fascinating. So let's talk a little bit about growth. So Authority Brands, oh my gosh, you currently have 16 brands and you're growing. You're always looking for more. Can you tell us a bit about that strategy and how do you determine which businesses that you want to move on?
Yeah, that's a great question. So clearly home services is the space, so that's kind of the given. But outside of that, there's a couple things that we normally find attractive in brands that we buy. So we like either recurring revenue, so that's something like house cleaning, right? Where you sign up for service and then kind of every other week ongoing, we come out and service your home. So when it comes to like growing customer count and that, it's a model that we like, recurring revenue. We also like kind of what we call break fix or emergency service. So that would be like HVAC. So if your HVAC system in Texas in your house goes out in July, you're going to call to get it fixed. You are going to prioritize spending money on that versus other things. So those are kind of the 2 big things that we look at, but we also like brands where each individual location can do over $1 million in revenue. And so that's our target, is that each franchise location is doing over $1 million. And so that to us is attractive because it is much, much, much easier to manage 2,000 locations all doing $1 million than it is to manage 4,000 locations all doing $500,000. Mm-hmm. So it's much easier math for us to make that happen. So those are kind of the general things we look at. But I will say that right now, because the trend is platform, right? Platform brands and franchising are becoming a thing. There's a lot that's been bought. So that's our new thing now, is maybe all of the brands we might be interested in, a lot of them have been bought up either by us or by one of our competitors. So we actually just started our first brand from a single location. So we bought a landscaping business in Ohio, and we just started the process of franchising. We've sold 4 franchise locations. It's called Lawn Squad. So that is more likely probably the path that we'll be down, but it is really exciting to watch some of the brands that are kind of new and emerging in home services. Kind of emerging brands are what we refer to as franchise brands that are just kind of getting their start, starting to sell locations and starting to see that initial growth curve kind of take off. Because, who knows, the next couple brands we buy, some of them might still be in their infancy. So it's very exciting. But overall, that's kind of the approach we take as far as how we think about brands that we bring into the Authority Brands platform.
That's awesome, thank you. And you know, when I heard you say recurring revenue, all I can think of is Paul and how much recurring revenue I provide to Applebee's Unlimited every single month. So as a single brand, how do you engage new franchisees?
Well, I think about 90% of our franchisees started out as customers of our stores. So they love the brand. They love the feel, the experience, the full customer experience. They like the quality of the product, and they liked how we differentiated ourselves from the big box competitors like a Walmart or a Lowe's where you could buy birdseed. So that's how we typically find brand new franchisees. Right now, we're at a point where about 50% of our growth is internal. So it's existing franchisees who are opening second, third, fourth, up to actually 10 units. And also, we've been franchising for a long time, and as people are retiring, it's the easy button is to find an existing franchisee who would then buy their opportunity. But so consumer marketing, marketing to the consumers, having easy access, having if you're talking about just in general lead generation, having a great website, great franchise development website, having it heavily SEO'd, and just being out there, right? Just PR, and that's the way to do it. We've spent a lot of money doing a lot of different techniques to obtain brand new franchise candidates, people who would want to start their store. And honestly, every year I think, why do I do that? This organic growth is the way to go, and focused growth.
Excellent, thank you. Back to Nebraska to talk about innovation.
That's right, thanks. So I've got a question for both of you. Joe, I'll start with you. Scooter's coffee is currently ranked at number 65. Congratulations. Can you please share a recent innovation that either drove top-line revenue or created productivity gains for your franchisees?
By the way, 65 is way too low. We're working on that. We're getting it up higher, but that's what Don would say. Innovation shows up in a lot of different ways in our business. The most obvious is in product. It's a place that we're really excited and really leaning in. In fact, we hired someone who is just in charge of menu. So as we grow, we're starting to hire resources we didn't have before. And so if you've been in our stores the last couple weeks, we launched a new product, Cinnamon Toast Crunch Latte, which is amazing if you haven't had it. What is so unique is that it is a partnership with another brand, something we hadn't done before, and it is unique. You can only get it at Scooter's Coffee. So that's part of the uniqueness about it. We just signed a partnership with Oreo, which I can't talk about that out loud. That's coming. You're going to see some product innovation in that space. And there are some really interesting partnerships we're looking at down the road, because we realize that is, for a business that is habitual and people come often, you want new things. And so we love what is proprietary to us today and does great, like our Caramelicious, which it's our best seller. But bringing in new product and that innovation is just really creating some excitement in our stores, especially in markets where we've operated for a long time, like Lincoln and Omaha. But there's other ways that we're thinking about innovation. And if any of you remember last fall, or early winter, what we launched or did for the first time is we hosted a college football bowl game, the Scooter's Coffee Frisco Bowl in Frisco, Texas. So quick story, I'll tell you, they came to us actually at the end of 2022 in September and asked if we wanted to sponsor this bowl game. I'm like, it's September, like we can't pull it off in 2.5 months. But fortunately, there was an opportunity that came back in 2023, but it was June 1st, which was a little more time. And I remember I was actually driving to Lincoln that night, and I called Don, and I was talking to him about it and getting him all fired up about this opportunity. And I think he said something like, well, can we do this? I'm like, oh yeah, I'm letting you know, we've already done it. It's done. I'm just letting you know that we're going to host this bowl game. And that was December 19th in Frisco, and it was just such a moment for us as a brand, our first big branding moment nationally. But the output of it, and we just had a meeting where we host new franchisees, what we call Be Amazing Day, our version of Discovery Day. And we had 2 people in there who said, we're here because we saw the Frisco Bowl. Had never heard of your brand before. And so this was that first meeting after, so we know that that's paying dividends, but we have to look in our space now at innovation in many different ways. It can be the actual building itself, it can be product, or it could be partnerships. So,
I love that.
Fun.
Also excited to hear about the Oreos because that's part of my love language. I'm excited about that. All right, Tom. Empower Brands recently rebranded. What were the primary reasons to undergo the change?
Yeah, great question. Lynx Franchising bought Outdoor Living Brands in September of 2021. And as we did that, Lynx was a commercial brand and residential brands was Outdoor Living Brands. And we looked at those two brands, and after the acquisition, they were still operating commercial and residential and still working within the silos. And our CEO, Scott Zeid, in his wisdom, said, how do I put these two together and do it in a material way, not only for the short run, but for the long term? So we took a look at, name change. We took a look at changing the culture, putting our own DNA and our own stamp on it. And as we did that, that was roughly a 6-month process in order to do that. The name came last, but we talked about our franchisees being paramount, right at the center of everything that we're doing. And the phrase championing the success of our franchisees, that resonates without our organization. Our mission and our core values, people first, foundational, making sure that we are principled individuals, we're authentic. Those are words that don't live on our walls. They live on every action that we take. And the franchisees that come in for Discovery Day, they tell us they feel that along the way. So as we connected those two verticals, commercial and residential, together, we felt that we got a lot of synergies associated with it, and we're able to accelerate much quicker. To Heather's point, after that combination of brands, those platforms, we acquired 4 new brands, and 3 of them were incubation brands, what Heather spoke to. That was, Canopy Lawn Care, Wallaby Windows, and Bumble Roofing. So we started these from singular brands and are growing them out right now and finding real success in the marketplace, as well as the organic growth that we're seeing with the additional 7 brands that we own.
Fantastic, thank you. Dr. Goser, should we move on to artificial intelligence?
Why don't we go to the advice to students so that we have time for the students to ask some?
I think that's a great idea.
All right, you want to kick that off?
Sure. All right, so you all have reached senior levels in franchising. Can you discuss the skills and experiences that allowed you to reach such a high level? We'll take that on our side and then I'll pitch it over to you.
Excellent.
Either of you want to answer that?
Sure. I think, without a doubt, I speak from my own personal experience to start with, but as I see it in young leaders, it's adaptability and that the ability, not just to stay in a singular lane. The business world is so agile in reducing friction for our franchisees and the consumer. People want things quickly, they want quality, and they want it from a brand that they trust and they know. And I think having the agility to be a lifelong learner, to add tools to your tool belt, have skills, work on core competencies. The best thing I think you can do as you step out of college is continue to read. People that are giants in specific fields can teach you what you don't know on an audio book on the way back and forth from work in a couple of weeks. And I highly encourage that. Somebody gave me that feedback years ago, and I've used it, and it's been a real bonus to me in my career. Business is changing, and if you don't change at the speed at which it's moving right now, you'll get left behind. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about AI before we leave the stage today. But if you think acceleration in business is going fast now, look out, here it comes.
Yeah. By the way, I've got a book you could read, but that's a separate conversation. I love what you said, Tom. I'd add to it, relationship building is so important. And you heard it a little bit earlier, I think, from Heather. People have to know that you care about them and the business that they're building. And you can only do that through relationships. If it's just transactional, then guess what? Their interaction with the customer is probably going to be transactional as well. We have to make this personal, and you have to believe in that. I think also listening. In this space, it's listening for, as I often say, listen for the quiet voices. You're always going to hear from some of your people who are growing or growing fast, but you have to seek out some of those quiet voices. That's where sometimes you learn the most. And the third thing I would say is collaboration. Now, whether you work in a franchise system that has formal advisory councils or franchise systems, you can still accomplish the same thing as long as there is high collaboration. And I often say to the executive team, I know they get tired of hearing me say, the smartest person in the room is the room. It doesn't matter if one person has an IQ of 160, it's not more than the other 7 people in the room. So the more that you collaborate, 1 + 1 almost always equals 3, I'm telling you. So that's going to be, I think, important as you think about this journey as well.
That's great. Do you guys want to take that same question? Dr.
Yeah.
Goser, or do you want to ask the second one?
Yeah, why don't we jump into that? But first of all, I think I heard adaptability, listening, relationships, and collaboration. And I know my students think I fed that to you all, but excellent. I mean, excellent. Thank you. Do you all want to add on to those skills? Any that are missing?
Sure. So the one that I am focused on with my team, so I took my leadership team and sat down and said, what's the one skill outside of like the core function skills of your job, and for most of them that's marketing and sales, what's the one thing that makes you good at your job? And most of them said the same answer, which I thought was amazing. So that's our theme for this year, and that's resilience. And resilience is something that will serve you so well in your career, but it'll serve you best early on to learn to strengthen that muscle, because things will happen that aren't fair. Someone will get promoted ahead of you who shouldn't be, when you should be. That's just a fact. It's happened to probably all of us. Things have happened in our careers, and it's the ability to not let those things kind of beat you down. It's the day-to-day of not letting yourself get too frustrated or too upset or too this or too that, right? It's being able to let things roll off of you, to approach everything like it's a problem to be solved, not like some awful thing that was thrust upon you, right? So I think resilience is one that maybe we don't necessarily talk about enough, but if you think about it like it's a muscle, if you practice that one over and over and over again, it will serve you very, very well in your career.
Excellent. Thank you. Paul?
That is a great one. It's one of my favorites, is resilience. I call it grit.
Yeah.
Same thing. No, I mean, all the great ones have been taken. I would say my advice, though, is back to communication. We were given 2 eyes to take in information, 2 ears to take in information, and 1 mouth. So just bringing it all in rather than sending it out is important. And the other is just a commitment to making yourself useful. And I don't know if that's a skill set, I don't know if that's a talent, but just always finding a way to make yourself very valuable to your organization and to the key stakeholders. Constantly thinking, how can I find a way to be valued and to be of value? That's something I would encourage everyone to consider all the time. Because it's a gift to be valued.
Excellent. So why don't we, before we start with questions, so be thinking about your questions, why don't we talk about, if you were graduating in the near future, like some of our great students, and you wanted a career in franchising, what would be your next step? Anyone, either one of you, then we'll send it back to Nebraska.
Yeah, I wouldn't be afraid to just ask. I know that probably sounds crazy, but reach out to any of us who are on this call. Reach out to anybody who you see on LinkedIn that has franchising in their title and say, I'm looking for a job. I'm looking for an internship. What do you have? Can you help me? Because a lot of times you'd be surprised. People don't ask. So never be afraid to ask. Always ask for what you want. I say that across the board, even with my team when they're pressuring me. I want to raise, I want to raise, I want to raise. I'm like, you should always ask. I can't always give it to you, but you should always ask because no one is ever going to advocate for you as much as you will advocate for you and as much as you should advocate for you. So I just wouldn't be shy. We've said that this is like a family. You've heard some of the connections that some of us have just across brands and histories and pasts. Just put it out there in the universe. I want to work in franchising. Who has a spot that might be interesting for me? And I'm sure something will pop up, right? So just don't be afraid to put it out there.
Yeah, and be willing to start at the bottom. And don't expect that at a great degree, from a wonderful university with great instructors, doesn't mean you're going to come in as a director. You know, you may have to, I mean, my first day at Wild Birds Unlimited, the first thing I did was put my desk together. And then they said, and now my bosses brought their cats in, now go clean the cat box. That was my first 2 jobs. Then reach out and call every franchisee and introduce yourself.
Awesome.
That was my first day.
It's counterintuitive to have cats with birds, though, is it not?
Well, inside, you do make a very, very good point. Inside cats.
Gotcha. Thank you. Back to Nebraska.
Yeah, I'd say that Nebraska is an agricultural state with hard work in its DNA. And I'll tell you, it's written on the stadium, you see it on the light post, in your grit, your glory, and hard work pays. So when you're thinking about getting after it, I'll tell you, people from Nebraska, when employers look to you, they'll see that, they'll recognize that, and as you get to work and you prove them right, you'll grow within organizations.
Yeah, I think there is something to the point Heather Rod just asked, and it's interesting thing. It's like any profession where people do a ride along with a police officer or fireman, do a ride along with a franchisee. You know, watch what their day or their week or their process looks like, and it will give you a sense pretty quickly whether you want to do this or not, based on the different elements. And there's also a difference between someone who owns one store versus those who built a system and maybe have some other support along with it. But just understanding that a little bit deeper about what that day looks like, and there's nothing you can really, there's no other way to supplement that other than actually go out and do it and hear and see what it feels like.
Why don't we take questions? I don't know if we have any here in Louisville. Does anyone have a question?
Any students that have a question for
If you
anybody on
do,
the panel?
If you'd come right up here to the microphone, if you don't mind. Thank you so much. We have one coming up now, and then we'll turn it back to you, Dr. Thomsen.
Sounds good.
So, question for you, since you all have had established franchises, what have been some hurdles with kind of starting up a new concept from the scratch?
Oh yeah, I mean, the reality is there's pros and cons to both. So when a brand is really established, impacting change can be really challenging. And if you think about franchising, all of our contracts with our franchisees are mostly 10-year agreements. So let's say we buy a brand, there's a lot of stuff in 10-year contracts that takes us a long time to potentially change. So the pro about starting from zero is we try to start with a foundation that we know will lead to success. But one of the best ways to grow a franchise brand is through referral and validation of your own franchisees. And so sometimes when you don't have that, when there's not 10, 20, 30 people to get on the phone and say, yeah, it was tough, but this is what I did, and look at this beautiful business I've built. People in that instance are buying us. Like, they're buying me and the team. And so that's just a different type of dynamic. So it can be a little more challenging sometimes without that validation, but there are definitely kind of pros and cons on both sides of it.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. Dr. Thomsen?
Oh, we do have a couple of questions.
Howdy, my name's Kellen Carney. I want to thank you guys for spending your time with us today. My question has to do with culture, and I was wondering how, when you set the mission and the vision and the core values of your company, how much do you push to impress that upon your franchisees? And then how much do you let that culture kind of bubble up from the local communities that you're serving and the specific, especially if you're operating across the U.S., the different pieces of culture that come from different areas, and how do you manage that, both the corporate culture from the top down in through the grassroots up culture, team culture that develops?
I'll start. I would say certainly Scooter's Coffee, we're experiencing that right now. You know, obviously being started here in Omaha almost 26 years ago, and growing out through Nebraska, Iowa, Missouri, the surrounding states, but now showing up in Utah and California and soon to be Maryland and different places. There is some of that culture that you have to take into account as you grow. But I think the first part of the question, Kellen, is that you do want to make sure that people deeply understand your culture. In fact, on our Be Amazing Day, our Discovery Day version, owner immersion, where we bring in owners as they've signed their franchise agreement, we always lead with talking about our core values. In our case, integrity, love, humility, and courage. And as Don often says, they don't have to be your favorite 4 core values, but they can't be in conflict either. You have to truly believe in those things. And from those come other things like grace and partnership and kindness and all the things that will show that we've got the right people in our system. And that's true of our employees that we hire, because as we're scaling, we also need to hire people that live outside of Omaha and outside of Nebraska. Whether it's for real estate, construction, finance, field jobs as well, trainers. That's a challenge for us to grow and then keep your culture intact. So part of it is you have to be incredibly intentional. You have to talk about it all the time. Of course, you need to live it. But then I think the challenge is you grow a brand, and I think about, as I mentioned, McDonald's or Subway, where people own 200 or 300 stores. The opposite of that in the franchise space is Chick-fil-A, who's now grown to 3,000 stores, but you get to own 1 store. There's a few people who have grandfathered in with a couple of 3, right? But generally, it's 1 store owners, and they're wildly consistent across the U.S. because they've been so intentional about culture and values. So on our way to 3,000 stores, we have to have that same type of mentality. And it's okay to say, you know what, this person doesn't fit who we are. You know, we'll politely allow them to go back to being a customer with us. But that's so important. You do have to be very intentional about it.
I agree with you completely, Joe. And I just add to that everything that you do speaks, and every action that you take, and especially with adversity, adversity will reveal character, and it will reveal your culture. So at your worst times, how you react to it's important.
Excellent. Dr. Goser, we have one more question here. Do you have one in your audience to bat it back to you?
We have one more as well.
Okay.
Okay, we'll
Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, and then we'll throw it back to you. Yes.
So when you said that you should start at the bottom, did you mean you should like work at a cash register as an employee in the company?
So you could do that, or I think really what, when we're talking about like just being open when you're looking for a job kind of first out of college, that you might need to start at like a lower level in the organization than maybe you wish you could start at. So you might want to start at, I think Paul said like a director. The reality is if you're in marketing, you might start as a marketing specialist and not a marketing manager or not a director of marketing. And that gives you the opportunity to get to learn. But we always love it when people work in our franchise locations too, because that means that they understand like interacting with customers and what that's like. They understand the franchisee's perspective a little bit better. So it could be working at a register in a store in a location, or it could be coming on the corporate team and working as a specialist or a coordinator. But I think it's just being open to what opportunities maybe present themselves and then trying to make the most of it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That was a good question. If I can add on to that, there are so many stories, and I'm looking out at my KFC boxes, it brings me such joy. But there are so many stories in Kentucky Fried Chicken where people started at a register or started as a cook and became vice presidents or franchisees. So they had their education paid for that way. So you can definitely do that. That was a great question. Thank you. All right, Dr. Thomsen. Well done. Thanks.
Hello, I'm Tyler Vanderwoody. It's nice to have all of you here today. I had a question. So I'm kind of in a similar situation where there's a potential to franchise later at the business that I'm at with them, but we haven't franchised before. So specifically when you're starting a franchise, like those first probably 1, 2 to 10 businesses, when you're looking at getting a manager for in the store, what would you say is most important for looking at their qualities, as we've been talking about how important it is to have the right people on the bus in our class this semester?
I think initially when you're bringing people on to run that first unit, the unit level economics and the profit flow through are the most important. Making sure that you can get that revenue ramp in the first 3 years. So your franchisor will help you with that, to give you benchmarking to say, this is where you should be. And there's no substitute for you being on the front line to start with, and for you to understand what that looks like, to see how high up is. So when you put in a manager, you're confident that you've lived it, you understand it, and that person can go in there and actually you're replacing yourself at that point in time. So I'd highly recommend being in the trenches to get going, and then getting onto your second or third model after that.
The only thing I'd add is that, you want that person to be truly customer centric, depending on the model and how close you are to the end customer. Because part of the experience that I've seen over the years is that when that person is customer centric, they attract other people that are. And therefore, as you're building out your brand, that becomes what you're known for. I mean, we all kind of say that's what we want to be known for, but largely our experiences every day at service businesses are just average. But when it's different, it's different. And when you find those people, then you really have something special.
Thank you.
Any more questions on your side?
One more. One of my professors would like to ask a question, I think. I might have two more.
Okay.
If we have time.
Thank you very much. I just had Scooter's coffee this morning, so it's kind of awesome to meet the CEO in the afternoon, unexpectedly. Question for all of you guys. Some of us maybe are interested to become a franchisee. So A, what does it take? And B, where do you go to find out more?
A franchisee. I didn't say that earlier, but I am also a franchisee of one of our brands. I'm a franchisee of Woofies, which is a mobile dog grooming business. To tie back to Paul's statement on passion, because I liked the unit level economics and I like dogs, so it made sense for me. But for most brands, most franchise brands have franchise development websites that basically put out all kinds of information about kind of the criteria to become a franchisee, what that looks like. So that's one path. Or there's also the path of working with a franchise broker. So franchise brokers are free for people to use if you want to work with one who will bring you opportunities based on what they think works for you. So really it's about understanding what's important to you. So in a lot of our brands, unlike maybe coffee, they are not sexy. We kind of joke about that, but that's a really important thing to highlight with potential franchisees, because if it's really important for someone to be at a cocktail party with their friends and they're not the type of person who's comfortable saying, I own a house cleaning business, granted it might do, I think our average right now in our item 19 is $1.7, $1.8 million per location, but it's a house cleaning business, right? So there's certain things that you have to take into account that are important to you personally that can help you decide what brand is the right fit for you. Some of it's passion, some of it's financials, some of it's startup cost, some of it might be the business model and hours, right? Most of our businesses are Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. That's very different than retail. That's very different than some others. So it's important to understand what's important to you, I think, and then that can help you find the right franchise brand, because there is absolutely a brand that fits what everyone is looking for. That's the benefit of there being so many franchise brands out there. But then you can go to the brand directly if you know you're passionate about something, you can go to the brand directly, or you can always work with a broker who can help you kind of navigate the process of finding the right thing for you.
There are a lot of websites that I can do a plug, can't I, for another one of our board members, Franchise Business Review, which is a company. Michelle Rowan, who is on our board, is the COO and president of that company, where they survey franchisees and then rank franchisors on how satisfied their franchisees are. Not necessarily just by the number of units or the unit economics per se, but how happy they are with the support and the community, the training, the marketing, the tech support, and you'll get an array. You'll get to see over 400 brands that are surveyed every year. Not everybody does it, not everyone in franchising, but also the International Franchise Association has a directory of brands so that you can go and find, and I think your comment, it's a comment I actually ask candidates, is like, what will be important for you to say about owning a Wild Birds Unlimited store when you're at a cocktail party? And I actually stole that from a friend of mine in franchise development, because I think it's a great question, because you're right. Some people do want to say, well, I have a bird feeding store, or I have a coffee shop. I mean, they're cool, passion businesses. But I have a franchisee who owns 10 stores, and when I ask her what she's happy, she's like, I've created jobs for hundreds of people. That's just a different spin from a different, she's coming into passion just in a different way. And it could be a Wild Birds Unlimited, but you could have one of any of your brands and create wealth for others and employment for others and feel as good as feeding thousands of birds, right? So it just depends on where your passion bucket gets filled.
That's right, that's right. Well, I know we do have a few more questions, but we're also a little bit out of time. So, Dr. Thomsen, did you have another one there, or because we can still,
Well,
we can still ask
we
them.
have dinner waiting for
Yes,
us.
I
know
thought
you guys
that.
got to, while we were speaking, but we have some great community people here, and our speakers are going to stick around for a little bit, so
Same
we
here.
could probably maintain our Q&A as we eat,
Same
if that's
here.
okay with you all.
Yes, that's okay, and we will. We can sign out if you want. We'll just do our Q&A separately,
That's fantastic.
and then you all can eat. Well, it's been wonderful. Nebraska, has been great to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Will.
All right, thank you. And we do have a couple more questions, but I understand people may need to leave as well, so I want to be respectful of that. And our two guests, if you don't mind staying a couple more minutes.
of course not.
Let's go ahead and do our couple more questions.
So, as the franchisor, everybody has their moral values, their moral compass they stick to, and your mission statement. How do you, as you scale to hundreds and hundreds of stores, how do you make sure everyone is staying true to your values and your mission statement?
That's a great question. It's important in the development process as you're bringing new people in. And when you get mature, you also have turnover, right? People retire and sell their business, or their spouse is moving and they need to move with them and they need to sell their business in some cases. And it's just very clearly communicated about. It's what we lead with in the franchise development process. Very first conversation that we have with a candidate is talking about the mission, vision, and values. And it's the last conversation before someone gets approved to own one of our franchises. And in our system, which is I think more and more common nowadays, our operations people, there's another funny saying in franchising that franchise development dates the candidates and operations marries them. So, we're done with them after a certain point. It's not necessarily true to be done with them, but our operations team has institutional authority to say no to somebody. So if Heather came in and we loved her and she had all the money in the world and she checked all the boxes, but it was clear that she really didn't believe in the mission, vision, and values of our business. And we just wanted to make a sale. And our ops team clearly knew it. They would say, no, we're not doing it. We're a little unique too, is that I'm a non-commission house. So
Really?
I've never been.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Can we talk about that later?
Yeah, we can. Yeah,
That's
we
cool.
can. I don't. We don't pay. I've been with the brand for a long time, and when I started, we had 28 stores. Now we have 360 with another 18 sold. But yeah, I don't get paid commission, and I only did it once for a small window of time, and I didn't like it. I didn't like it because I felt like the franchise salespeople were driven financially to say yes, and may have allowed a couple of people in who weren't complete culture matches.
Interesting.
Does that help?
Yes.
At all? And then,
A lot, yeah.
then there's another thing where when you have a franchisee who's not in alignment with your mission, vision, and values, and in some cases we had franchisees who were invited into our system before we had that culture as well defined. It was always there, it just wasn't as well defined. And part of it was about one of our values is that we embrace diversity. And so we had some issues with a couple of franchisees. And I made the phone call and just said, I can help you out or I can help you out. You have two choices. You can.
So what does that process look like? Say there's a McDonald's down the street and they're not living up to what McDonald's core value is and whatnot. Do you call up that specific store and be like, all right, you're gone, and then find somebody else to take their position? Or do you have a list of applicants that might be ready for that position?
Tackle this piece of one.
Please.
Yeah, so if you think about it, every franchisee has a contract with the franchisor, and there are certain things outlined in it that are requirements that the franchisee do. So in most instances in our brands, let's take something like super extreme, like if somebody was ripping off their customers, right? Like we're in HVAC, I'm sure some of you guys have seen like 2020s or Dateline where they're like, this HVAC company is overcharging little old ladies when things get broken or whatever that is. So there's things in our agreement that are grounds for termination of the agreement. So in most instances, so like for someone like McDonald's, you can imagine they would have things about where they're sourcing their food, right? Like it has to be a McDonald's, so it has to all come through the same kind of supply chain. So if somebody started selling like something completely random, that would be in violation of their franchise agreement. Most of the time, those agreements outline the steps that have to be remedied if someone's in violation. So normally it's not, oh, you made a tiny mistake, we're pulling your franchise. It's, hey, are you aware this isn't how this is supposed to work? Let's help you intent to cure, like let's help you fix this problem. But then if it's something that is unresolved, then it's exactly that. Normally it's, okay, let's help you exit and bring in someone new. Or it might just be, depending on what's happening in the location, it might just be to shut it down. But that's pretty rare in franchising. Yeah. That's very, very rare. And I think that's important to keep in mind. I think in the entire time I've been in franchising, I think I've seen it happen 3 times, maybe, across many different brands, 3 times total. So it's not super common to have the franchisor say, hey, we're shutting this down. It normally has to be incredibly severe.
I gotcha.
Yeah, it has to be a clear legal violation. I've in my history, I've had one where I was just like, it's over. And then another one where I said, it's over, but I have a buyer for you who will give you, you can leave with nothing, which would be unfortunate for everybody. Or you deserve to be able to sell this and, you know, take away something, at least, if nothing else, just your initial investment. But you do have to go.
Okay.
In the restaurant industry, food safety will do that. If you violate food safety.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you. One more? We'll do one more and then we'll close this out. Hi
Thank
there.
you. Hi, my question is, how do you prevent from getting in an adversarial relationship with your franchisees? Like, I know that Ford has a good relationship with some of their dealerships, but they have been fighting over selling electric vehicles and promoting them and keeping them in stock and all these things. So, you know, how do you prevent the fighting and keep you on the same page when you decide to pivot and your franchisees do not want to pivot?
That's a great question.
Yeah,
Big one. So I was in a brand, my first brand in franchising was called Rainbow International. Originally it was called Rainbow International Carpet Cleaning and Dyeing Company. So they cleaned carpets. And I guess back in the 80s, if you didn't like the carpet in your house, they would come and dye it a new color. Who knew? I didn't know that. But I learned that because I asked a lot of questions. But I came into that brand about 5 years after they had decided to shift from carpet cleaning to water damage restoration. So like if a room got flooded, they would bring in their equipment and pull all the water out. So basically the approach that we decided to take then, right, and I think this is always the best approach in franchising, maybe the best approach in life, is not to try to lead with a big stick, but a carrot. Here's all this incentive for why we want you to make this change in your business. And we're gonna actually fund some of this change, if not all of it, for you. You have to buy new equipment. Guess what? We're gonna match every dollar you put into equipment, we'll put $1 into your equipment for you. We wanna motivate you to change. We wanna take every opportunity to make it exciting for you to change. And then at the end, there might be a couple holdouts where we say, hey, your contract is coming up. If you don't want to change, then maybe we can help you find someone to sell your business to. But I think the point that, and actually we've been here for a day, spending some time together, catching up, right? We've known each other for a little while. If you focus on having a relationship with your franchisees, then when challenging things happen, they might get upset. I had a challenging phone call with a group of franchisees today, and the second I got off the phone, I got an email from one of them, the very loud one, saying, Heather, I just want to be sure you know that like we really, really like you. We're just really frustrated right now. That's okay. You can be frustrated. Like, we're like therapists
It's called
half
passion.
the time.
Sometimes that's passion. That's
But
how
it's
passion
exactly
is
right. Yeah, so I think
manifests.
it's always better received when you have franchisees as part of your decision making. So I don't know the specific situation that you're referring to with Ford, but I can imagine if they had pulled some people in from their dealership network to say, we want you to sit on this committee and we want to understand your thoughts about making this move. What are the things that you think we should know? What are your peers saying? Because it's just info to make you better, right? And to arm you better. So I think focusing not as like, we want to get this done and our franchisees are in the way. It's how do we make sure our franchisees are best positioned for technology and what's happening in the future? How do we get them educated? How do we give them the resources they need? How do we help support via funding changes they might have to make to their business or to their business model? So it can be tough, and you'll see a lot of times that a lot of franchisors struggle with it. It's hard because you have to have a team that all day, every day, sometimes gets yelled at and knows that, like, okay, today I'm the therapist. It's okay, let it out. It's all right, get it out, get it out. Okay, how do we move forward together, right? Versus a team that hears that and immediately starts pushing back. Like, sometimes you just have to be resilient, right? You just have to let it wash right over you.
Excellent.
And time and communication. Just giving people plenty. And when you think you have plenty, then double it. Double of time to make change, and communicating it over and over and over again, early, often. And it's when you anticipate, when you know your customers, like we do, you also know who needs what. Like and identifying the fact that one size never fits all. Just like your group of friends. You can't treat all of your friends the same. You treat your friends the way they want to be treated. And so you reach out to them in different ways. And sometimes that means getting on a plane and saying, this is really hard, I get it. And we're not on the same side of this issue. But let's figure it out. And sometimes you have to break bread with them. You have to see them. You have to look at them in the whites of their eye and say, I want to get here together. What can we do together to get there?
Excellent. Well, thank you. That was a great question. Thank you so much to our guests, Heather and Paul. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for staying.